My name is Josh Carlson, and I am the Market Development Coordinator at GW Publisher. GW provides print and digital resources for career and technical education with a full line across agriculture, food, and natural resources pathways. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. You are in listen-only mode, but we definitely want to hear from you. Please be sure to add comments, questions, and ideas in the chat box, and we will spend time at the end of the session answering questions, and I will be monitoring the chat box throughout the session to address them during the Q&A portion of today's presentation. We are so excited to have a GW author today with us. Dr. Barry Croom has more than 35 years of experience in agriculture and extension education. His career interests developed as a high school junior when he coached his first dairy judging team for the local junior high FFA program. Croom began his professional career as a high school agriculture education teacher and was selected by the National FFA organization to develop and present in-service workshops to teachers across the United States. His students earned state and national recognition for academic achievement, and he was recognized as the Sampson County Schools Teacher of the Year and received the honorary American FFA degree from the National FFA organization. In 1996, Croom became an executive secretary responsible for the statewide FFA program at North Carolina State University and eventually became an alumni distinguished undergraduate professor there. He has taught more than 30 different courses at the graduate and undergraduate levels. Dr. Croom maintains a research program that focuses on effective teaching, career and technical education policy, and diversity in agriculture and extension education. He is the author of 2 textbooks, 46 peer-reviewed publications, and more than 20 popular publications. He served as professor and department head for agriculture education and general agriculture at Oregon State University before returning to his native South. Part of his responsibilities included training and development for high school teachers and the development of a curriculum for agriculture and extension education. Dr. Croom is now a professor for agriculture leadership, education, and communication at the University of Georgia. He divides his time between teaching courses on the Athens and Tifton campuses. For our Florida educators listening, next year, your state is adopting materials for your 2 introductory courses, Agriscience Foundation 1 and Fundamentals of Ag, Food, and Natural Resources Systems. For every career and technical education title that we bid into Florida, our authors and editorial teams review your current state standards to make sure our content meets the needs of your course. We are excited that our Principles of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources title is expected to cover all the standards for the Fundamentals course. We have also created an alignment chart to the industry recognized credential available on the CAPE list, the CAPE list, the AEST Agriculture Association certification. For our middle school students, our authors are building out additional lessons to meet the unique needs of Florida, including a new lesson on aquaculture and additional animal science lessons for dairy animals and poultry. GW Publisher also offers a Tools for Educators page where we post free downloadable classroom posters, instructional strategies, and classroom activities you can use right away in your classroom. Without further ado, let's hand it over to Dr. Barry Croom.
Josh, thank you very much. I am very happy to be with you today. And if there are any of our Florida friends online, I'm at UGA Tifton. I'm 60 miles from the Florida-Georgia line. And for those of you who live in North Florida and South Georgia, you know, we got some snow. We were so excited last week. We got snow. It made the national news, which is unusual. In the deep South where I'm at, if we have a heavy frost, that'll probably cancel school for the day. And so for those of my colleagues who are here from GW who are in Chicago, where the temperature is probably like minus something, we feel for you, but we like it down here and we enjoyed our snow. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here. I'm one of the authors on the Principles of Ag, Food, and Natural Resources textbook that you're looking at here, along with my colleagues, Travis Park. Some of you may know that Travis is the National FFA advisor, and he's a good friend of mine. And he and I worked on this book along with John Rayfield out of Texas and Cassie Smith out of Idaho. All four of us, we have a background teaching in high school or middle school ag education before we moved into higher education. And so we have a real love for agriculture, FFA. I like to tell people that I bleed blue and gold, and I still do remember those wonderful, wonderful times. Josh, let's look at the next slide, if we will. The next slide shows you the table of contents for this textbook, and you'll see that there are 17 different units. And the way our textbooks are set up, the way we wanted to do this when we got together with Goodheart-Willcox is we wanted to set them up not as chapters, but we wanted teachers to think of each of these sections as lessons. So these textbooks in agriculture are really lessons, and they're designed to be a companion for what you may be doing in the class. And the really interesting thing, I think, this book it's huge. It's over 1,100 pages. It covers in detail all of the contents that you see on the screen, and we're going to dig into some of the basic elements of it as we go. But it's one of those things where it's almost cafeteria style. If you don't teach livestock, but you do teach plant production, you can use the plant production information. If you do ag mechanics, we have ag safety, ag technology, power and engineering, ag mathematics. Those sections would apply to you. This is a really good, I think it's a really good foundational text. And let's go to the next slide, if we will. The next slide shows you a little bit about who your authors are, but there's some people missing on this page. And on that page are missing all of our peers who teach high school, middle school, and they've been elementary school agriculture, who went through this textbook with us and advised us all the way through. I don't have the page in front of me, it's in the front of the textbook, but I think we have a couple of pages of acknowledgments of all the teachers who read every lesson that was placed in the textbook and provided real feedback. This was not just four authors sitting down and writing a textbook about what we thought was important. We were writing a textbook based upon what teachers were telling us was important. So Travis, John, Cassie, and I, we had a great time writing this book, but we really owe it all to all the reviewers who peer reviewed it. Let's take a look at a lesson, Josh, if you will. Just to give you an idea of how all of these lessons start, as you can see, Lesson 1.1, Agriculture's Impact on Society. And we really wanted to focus on getting students engaged with a textbook. You know, when you say textbooks to students, it's a little scary, and it's hard to get students excited about textbooks. So we wanted to ease them into this. And so a lot of the early pieces of a lesson are really part of a strategy called pre-reading. We want to introduce them to the objectives. We want to encourage them to look for certain words. And even before they begin reading, we want them to spend some time thinking about what the topic might be in the lesson as they read through it. So that's a pre-read. It's called pre-reading, and that's a strategy that we use. Now, on the next slide, we also kick in a few other things, like you see here, an ag-ed connection. You'll see ethics in agriculture. You see various pullouts through the book. It's not just straight text. For those of you who were in high school, I dare to say back in the 70s and 80s, you may remember the textbooks were like a death march going through them. Very few photographs, very text heavy. We know that the student today is not quite used to that. So we have things built into this particular textbook that help with it, including little pullouts. You see the Did You Know feature in the lower left-hand corner. Or the Safety First little pullout there, vignette. We have little vignettes that throughout the book that can be used to as what we call bell ringers. If you're just starting a unit and you want students to, as they come in the door while you're taking roll or doing all the other stuff that you do before a class starts, you can use some of these items as bell ringers. Grab your textbook, turn to page 12, read the Did You Know, and respond to it. It makes it pretty simple for you as a teacher as you move through. Every chapter, of course, has content, but as the next slide shows you, really it's also about assessment. As you know, as a teacher, you're assessing as you go. You're looking at the students and you're looking at them to see if they're picking up what you're putting down. And so we tried to help with that. Every lesson has a review and assessment piece to it at various levels. We have first of all a lesson summary, as you see there. We have a review of the vocabulary that they may have seen. We have a section on know and understand, which asks them a few questions about what they may have learned during the lesson. So these are good checks for understanding that you can then use both as a formative assessment to make sure that they really picked up what you were teaching in the lesson. The other thing that's important to point out is, as you see on this page, there are sections on analyze and apply, and we'll come back to those in just a minute and look more in detail. But we also want to make sure that we're very well connected to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and making sure that students see that agriculture fits as a part of all four of those elements of STEM. So we tried to build in those connections in each lesson, as you can see here, trying to reinforce what our colleagues in science are up to. But, agriculture is known for hands-on. And as the next slide shows you, we really are interested in making sure that the textbook supports what you might want them to do when they're away from their desks, when they're not necessarily directly in front of the chalkboard or the whiteboard now. But we do have activities built through each of the lessons that require them to do something. A little hand-eye coordination, for instance, writing a speech here, or plant reproduction. We may ask them to take a moment and to access what they've learned in the lesson, and then to try to use it in some tangible way. And beyond that, as the next slide shows you, we're also very much interested in making sure that all pieces of the integrated three-circle model, the integrated model for ag education, which is the FFA, Supervised Agricultural Experience, and also instruction, that all three of those pieces are represented in this textbook. That was a key thing that the authors insisted on, and GW wanted us to do as well. So you'll see throughout all the lessons an FFA connection, how they can use the lesson material in FFA. If we don't do that in ag education, if we don't find ways to connect FFA to that instruction, to that SAE, as we'll see later, then the circles, the three-circle integrated model that you see, the three integrated circles that you see so many times, they're not connected. We want to make sure that students and teachers, we all understand that they are interconnected and they rely on each other. So as you can see, there's an FFA and Ag Ed connection there. Also, we've decided, yes, thank you. We're now on this particular part about history and career connections. This is I find this to be a really interesting part of the textbook, because we're really looking at educating the whole student. It's not just about STEM, it's about other parts of a student's life. We're trying to reach them in areas that maybe the sciences can't reach, such as history and ethics and culture. And so all of those make up a person. So we have history and career connections throughout the textbook as well. Here's an example of what it was like to sharecrop back in the day. Now, can't you imagine taking this little vignette that you see here and then having them go home and interview maybe some grandparents or some older members of the family, and asking them what agriculture may have been like when they were young people, and seeing how they can make a connection between what they're learning today and the way it used to be. And also, because we are in the business of encouraging students to look at careers in agriculture, you will see career connections throughout this textbook and every textbook really that GW offers in agriculture. And so the next slide, I think, is, okay, we're into another one. Experiential learning through ag. Here's another example, lesson 3.1. You can see we're consistent all the way through. Lesson objectives, words to know, There's always going to be a before you read thing there, but you also see something called SAE for all. We always try to build in some examples of how students can use this information in this text, in these lessons, and apply it to their supervised agricultural experience. That's critical because we want to make sure that what they take, they're able to take the information that's in the text and that what you're teaching them in class and turn around and make it their own somehow. When students can take information and make it their own and use it and apply it, transfer that information into something that's really important to them, they're going to really learn it and they're going to learn it well. So SAE is a huge component. All right, what's our next slide, Josh? Yep, here we go. Some more about SAE. You'll find that because we know that students that come in, all students are unique. They're all different. They're all at different places in their SAE. So sometimes you'll find things in there like foundational elements of an SAE, how to get it started, maybe some immersion parts, service learning, and also a place to check in. This is a reminder. The way I would see this as a teacher, should I be in the classroom now, is I would say, okay, turn to this particular page in your textbook and look at the questions on the check-in. And then have the students note somehow, either in their software that you might use, or in the record books or journal, whatever you have, what system you use, have them check in and make note of their progress in their supervised agriculture experience. Yeah. Okay, here's another example of some activities that we have. Again, hands-on applications. I believe that, yeah, this is the student lab workbook. I really like the way GW has put together their teacher workbooks and their student lab workbooks along the way. And I really like the way that they have established this. The people who write the student lab workbooks, a lot of them are educated teachers. Sometimes the author team writes those, but they also bring in practitioners from the field who do this for a living, who teach the subject matter, and they put together the workbook. So this is an example of a workbook that you can. It's available electronically, and you can also get it in a paper form for the classroom. So yeah, the lab workbooks, all that's available on the website. The GW online resources have all of this material. And by the way, here's some other examples of these. Because I'm a teacher educator, I usually have my student teachers, when they go out in the field and they're looking for, oh my goodness, they need content, they need structure, they need help developing lessons. Goodheart-Willcox has been very good in working with student teachers across the country and allowing them access during their student teaching experience to utilize some of these materials to help them put together the lessons that they're going to be teaching for the first time. These are structured in a very nice way because, with novice teachers out in the field, they need the information, but they need to know how to present it to students. So the lab works, again, are designed by professional educators and designed to be, deployable pretty easily, I guess is the term. All right, what's our next slide? We're talking about online resources. Here they are. The video library, fantastic. What's really important, the answer keys for the textbook and student lab workbooks are there. Customizable lesson plans, yes. When I first started teaching, I thought, oh man, I remember, how do I get to the end of the period? And then after I taught a little while longer, it's like, how do I get to the end of the day? Am I going to make it to the end of the day? And then am I going to make it to the end of the week? And then after I taught a little while longer, am I going to make it to the end of the year? And then after I'd gotten established pretty well, I realized, how can I make what I do better? And so I would go back and look at my lessons, and I would go back and look at what materials and resources were available. These resources are fantastic. You get the whole assessment suite. You get customizable lesson plans, PowerPoints that you can then use and make your own and use in your own way. All right, and so next textbook, that was a early high school textbook. Most recently, Melissa Riley, Kevin Jump, Ashley Yop, and I worked on an Exploring Ag, Food, and Natural Resources text. This is designed for the middle grades, grades 6 through 8, 6 through 9 in that area, whatever middle grades is in your particular state or school. That's what we were aiming at. And this was excited. It was an exciting little project to work on. Melissa Riley and Kevin both taught in middle schools. All four of us, Ashley, myself, Melissa, and Kevin, were all high school educators, ag educators. Melissa and Kevin taught in middle schools, and they were a big resource in helping us develop this text. Now, Ashley and I, we taught in the high school, but Ashley, she was really good at thinking about how students learn and what would really engage with middle school. So we did some interesting things with this Exploring Ag text. This is brand new. It's been out now, I guess, a little while, but it's certainly, we consider it to be a brand new text. What's our next slide look like? Here, contents, yes. When we initially started this textbook, we planned for it to be a pretty small textbook, middle school, do we really need all of that stuff that we would use in a high school? So we were aiming for a small textbook, and I'm looking at my copy of it now, and we're up to around 835 pages. Yes, middle school educators do a lot. 76 standalone lessons embedded across 12 sections, as you see there. I mean, that was an exciting thing. This is another example of trying to find develop a resource that really reaches out to help middle grades teachers wherever they are and whatever they're teaching. So if your program focuses on soil and plant science or something there for you, animal and wildlife science, yes, it's all there for you. If you do engineering, it's all designed for you. Kevin Jump worked on the ag engineering piece, and as a middle grades educator, he was really instrumental in working with our review team of other ag teachers across the country to make that ag engineering section meaningful and age appropriate for middle grades education, for example. And Melissa Riley, fantastic author on all the plant and soil science information. 76 lessons. But one of the things about this textbook that makes it different from every other textbook I've seen on the market, we've looked at a lot of them, and we really tried something with this. This was a risky venture, so to speak. Ashley Yop, as one of our author teams, had this idea that wouldn't it be cool if the textbook talked back to the students? And we thought, are you crazy? What are you talking about? And she explained to us that they're used to seeing these kinds of things, these emojis. They all have phones. They all know about emojis and whatnot. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had a way for there to be characters in the textbook that talk back to the students? And we thought, that sounds interesting, but is there anything to it? And actually, we have done some preliminary research on this and found that students what we did was this: we took students with and gave them, we went to a middle school and we did a little research project with them. We gave them a sample chapter with these characters in it, with the text talking back to them. And we gave them straight text with just pictures, but no characters in them talking back to them. And hands down, the students came back and told us that they thought that the chapters and the lessons with the characters in them they enjoyed reading them more. And we've just recently finished some research that shows us that, and we're publishing it next year, but the research is now that students who read these textbook chapters with characters talking back to them through these vignettes, as you see here, that they retained the material and did better on end of lesson tests and testing. So on the assessment side, we saw some significant changes as opposed to these not being in place. Again, we were just trying to be mindful of the middle grades mind. If I can say this, I've worked in middle schools. I did a research project last year. I was in a middle school all year, shadowing a teacher, middle school ag teacher. And wow, they're energetic and they need help focusing. So that's what those characters are helping do. And not only that, if you look at the design of the text, this is not a standard 1982 textbook with black and white photos of cows standing in a field. These are really colorful. They are age appropriate. They're designed very carefully with the learner in mind. Okay, what's our next slide look like here? So again, even in middle school, we have SAE. I mean, middle school is a great place to start with that. A lot of SAE in middle schools is exploratory, but it can be more than that. And you have two examples here: SAE, a school-based experience. Also, how you see SAE for All, how at least one FFA member or former ag student has gone on and taken their SAE to great heights and done well with it. So we try to provide those as an examples of what students can do with an SAE, practical examples. And again, these make really good mini assignments. If you've taught a lesson and you've got 10 minutes at the end of a class and you're not sure what to do, you can't leave middle schoolers alone. You got to give them something to do. This would be a good example of having them turn to a certain page in the chapter and read that SAE for All profile, and then maybe jot down some ideas about it. Again, hands-on activities built specifically for students. You'll see not only through the textbook and the lab manual, but actually you'll see in the textbook some examples of how they can go in and do a lab assignment. So here's an example. I'm looking at the one that says reaction time. This is an example of getting the students out of their seats, and they can take this page in their textbook and they can follow the directions so they can do an activity that helps reinforce what you're teaching them in class. Again, remember, we're not writing a textbook. We're trying to teach young people. That's the focus, and we're trying to use a textbook to help you do that. We really think, absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that reading is a gateway skill. Students who struggle with reading, they're going to struggle all the way through their academic career. They're going to struggle. They're going to struggle in math. They're going to struggle in science. They're going to have difficulty reading rules. They're going to have difficulty reading the National Electrical Code. When I visit schools here in Georgia, where I'm based, and they've got students in the classroom in high school, and they're having to take information out of the National Electrical Code handbook to do their wiring exercises. The skill that they first need is being able to read and interpret what's in those books. So reading is absolutely essential. We've also discovered that it's important to educate the whole student. So if you'll click on the next couple, I think we've got 3 examples here. We've got the Revolutionary Period, we've got Biltmore Forest, we've got Rachel Carson. It's about expanding knowledge too. It's about adding value to everything they're getting in the ag classroom. So, I mean, here are 3 good examples of it. How forestry got started in the United States. Also, what was it like to try to raise crops back in the early days? How difficult was it? And we also had sections in there that talked about famous agricultural scientists that they may hear about in a science classroom, for instance, or something that they may hear in an English class or a social studies class, but they can also see that here in your classes as well. And that reinforces the work of your colleagues across the school, but it also helps them reinforce what you're doing as well. Opportunities for further study. Oh, look at there, improving critical thinking skills. Absolutely essential. We're really trying to help students. If you really get down to it, I had an ag teacher once tell me this. I said, "Well, what do you teach?" He says, "That's not important." I said, he said, "I teach kids. I teach young people. That's who I teach." And I just happen to teach the subject of agriculture. I've always remembered him telling me that and realizing that we might be using the context of agriculture, but really what we want to do is we want to help our young students learn to be critical thinkers. Critical thinkers. So we've built into this product, this textbook, and the rest elements, and we'll see some in a moment that that help address critical thinking. We also understand that vocabulary is absolutely important. You know what? When I was teaching ag, and I would be teaching something in class, and when the student used the vocabulary, used the words, that might be Corcus alba for white oak, or it might be valve spring compressor in mechanics, or it might be bores and gilts. Whenever I heard students use the vocabulary, it was like, yes, they are picking up what I'm putting down. So we've tried to build in a fair amount about enhancing their vocabulary. We're encouraging them to read and to speak more in class. So you'll see some of these elements communicating about agriculture. This is a good way to find out what students really know and help clarify some misconceptions that they may have. Yes. And so here we go. Here's an example of one of our characters talking to the students. Is it possible to lose soil? And then have the students maybe tackle that as a bell ringer activity, or maybe if you're in between on something and you want to have them take a moment to think, hey, why don't you go to this page and read them before you begin, and then jot down some answers. But we want to encourage them to think. And again, here's some more hands-on activities. And out of that, we also want them, because when you're writing a textbook, you're trying to write it for a fairly large audience of people, from Idaho to Massachusetts to North Carolina to Texas. You're trying to catch everybody. And that's very difficult to do. But we found a way to do that. If you'll notice here in this little box, consider this, it says, do you notice any trends in your state, maybe in your particular region? We ask students to take the information and to apply it locally and put it in their own terms and what they see. It's about making connections between what's in these lessons to what they see and hear in their own environment. Yeah. Take a look at these. The thing I love about Goodheart is I've always liked this. Even when I was teaching ag, I used to go over and swipe all the industrial ed stuff when I was teaching mechanics, because the drawings, the diagrams, the graphics are so good. I think I remember when we did this one, when we wrote this, it shows that we actually have to draw out a lot of these things, and we'll hand it over to Goodheart, and their graphics design people really do a good job of putting it together. I was just remembering that by looking at the quality of the illustrations that you'll see. And here's an example of a little activity that we might have students do. It's built right into the textbook. What you need for it is right there. We tried to think, when we put together lab activities, we tried to put them together and think in terms of what would an agriculture teacher teaching middle school have in front of them or available to them in order to do this, without a lot of searching for materials. Yeah. Career corners, we mentioned this too a little bit earlier. We asked them to think about how they might fit into the industry of agriculture. A lot of students, when they think about agriculture, they may still think of farming and they may not see the application to it. But agribusiness, agricultural sciences, it's much bigger than just the physical act of farming. There's a lot of other opportunities out there for young people. So we try to put in there some seeds that help maybe boost their imagination and their creativity. Yeah. Again, look at this one. Here's another before you begin: boosting imagination, creativity, and having someone talk to the student about it. So those are interesting. We also are really interested in making sure that students understand that they are global citizens. Now more than ever, they're global citizens. They're citizens that will have to deal with international issues when they get older. And we want them to understand what other people are going through. And this is an example of creating some understanding of what other people may go through in terms of feeding a growing population. What's our next slide? Yeah, let's see. Again, ag food around the planet. Santiago, Cuba, talking about, what's grown there, what kind of products they have there. I think the next slide may have something. Yes, okay. Here's an example. About I remember this is some of my part of this textbook writing about, well, what do people eat across the world? What do they eat and how much does it cost? And so we talked about in Egypt what they might grow there and what a family might eat in a week. And you can see some of the things that they might eat and enjoy. It's all about, again, trying to think of ways to get students to think. We want them to think, but we also want them to think about their thinking. We want them to be critical thinkers. How do they come up with these ideas in their head? What kinds of thoughts are they having about what they're learning in class, and then what those things mean to them? So we spend a fair amount of time trying to explain pretty complex issues to them. And I think it's important to say this time around. When the four of us were working on this textbook, we approached this from a mindset as if we were in your shoes, standing in front of a class, trying to teach the subject matter that you see in the lessons. And so we tried to use language that students would understand. We tried to use illustrations that we thought that we would use if we were standing in front of the classroom, imagining the feedback we would be getting from students and what it would be necessary for you to teach it. So here's another example of trying to encourage critical thinking in students. And again, look at this, social studies and language arts. Can you imagine seeing that? Can you imagine seeing that in a textbook? Isn't that something? An ag textbook? Of course, because we're not educating just a part of a student. We're in the business of educating a whole student. The more they read, the better they will get at the act of reading. The more they know about the world that they're in, the more they can apply what they're learning in your classrooms. Yeah, what's next? There we go. So helps reduce a little stress. Reading is a wonderful and enjoyable thing. When I was visiting a middle school last year and doing a research project there, one of the things I noticed that I didn't expect to see was a large number of students who had checked out books in the library, books on fiction. They had them, and during times when class wasn't in session, they'd be sitting there reading. I found that to be refreshing and encouraging to see that. Students really dive in. Reading helps reduce stress for sure. Josh, I don't know if you can hear me well there, or how are we doing on time? I wanna make sure that I've reserved enough time here. We're cooking along here.
Yeah, we are pretty good on time. So
Okay. So here's some of the ways you say, okay, great. I got this big textbook. How am I going to get students to actually open it, use it, look at it? How can I deploy some of these things? First thing I might suggest you do is have a student, okay, you're going to crack open a textbook and they go, oh man, no, not another textbook. Yeah, open it up. And what I want you to do is go through this chapter first and do a little skimming and scanning. And skimming and scanning is you just quickly have them flip through the chapter, make a few notes, tag a few things in the book that you find that stand out to them, maybe some words, have them write down some words that they see that they don't understand, and just have them scan through, and then just have them write a sentence or two that says, what do you think this text is all about? I mean, what do you think you're going to learn by reading this particular text? Now, you don't want students to write in your textbooks, but we do have these handy dandy things I call them sticky notes, whatever brand you might use. And you can hand out a packet of those for some students and just have them go through and tag pages in the book that look interesting to them. And then have them have a quick discussion about why they're interesting or what they might want to know. Yeah, so here's an example. Active reading, also go through and engage with the text. Have them when they open the textbook, have a sheet of paper right next to it, and have them note things that they don't know how to say, or words, and have them spell them out. Have them really just kind of dig through the text. And again, it's about tagging the pages with little sticky notes of things that they found interesting, or that they found that they think is all right or cool, or a picture that they think is interesting, but they don't understand what it's about. Yeah, have them dig into that. Also have them go on through. Previewing is another example. Again, that's simply going through and outlining the structure of the lesson, the things that they might expect to see in that lesson. It's a way to get them ready to read. Instead of just diving in and say, okay, start reading, have them do a few things before they start reading to see if they're going to like it. The example I give is this. When you go to a bookstore yourself and you're looking at a book, you're not going to sit there and read the whole thing to decide if you want to buy it. You're not. But you are going to skim through it, and you're going to see, oh, the illustrations, yeah, I might like this. Or you might look at the table of contents, or you might read the first few lines of the book, or flip through and look at bits and pieces of it to decide if it's something that you want to purchase. The same thing holds true for your students when you pull up a lesson in the textbook. Again, you want to do some assessment here and summarizing. They've read the text, and one of the things I would recommend you do is something we used to call ticket out of class. You probably know what I'm talking about. And that's say, okay, take a note card, and on this note card or on a sheet of paper, write down the key points that you learned in that particular reading, and have them jot those things down. And then turn those in to you, and then you can look at them. The key thing is you've been teaching and you went through this, and when you give those little tickets out of class and you lay them down and look at them, sometimes you notice that what you thought was the main point was not what they thought was the main point. And so when you come back to class the next time, you guys can get together on what the main points are. But one way to really do that is something called summarizing. What was this chapter all about? People learn through they learn through visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And back in the day, the way I was taught was that, there are visual learners, there are auditory learners, and there are kinesthetic learners who learn by touch and movement. But really, we're all three. So a textbook, a lesson needs to have visuals so that they can get some sort of spatial representation. Now, can you imagine explaining to a student the 4-compartment stomach in a dairy animal, for instance, without a visual? They wouldn't get it. I mean, it would be hard. But in this particular visual, we get a chance to see the size and the direction that food may travel. I mean, the visuals are really important. It's called spatial representation, so to speak. I think we'll, review and assessment. What did we learn? Questioning. There you go. Asking students questions, and then maybe helping them find the answers. Trying to anticipate what their questions are too. In particular, in this career corner, we anticipated what the questions are, but sometimes in the text, you'll see open-ended questions we ask them because we want to find out what they know and how they see if they can apply that information in their own world and in their own words. And by the way, one note about summarizing, one of the more powerful learning experiences is when a student can take what we're teaching and put it in their own words and make it their own. They will retain that information much, much longer than if they didn't. Sometimes you have to go back through and look at it. Look at this, supply and demand, economics. I know when I was an economics student in college, I had to go back and read it about 20 times to get it. Sometimes have the student go back through and reread or rescan a document. Go back and read it again and see what you missed maybe in it. So rereading is also a good strategy. And so is note-taking. Here's an example of the Cornell note-taking system. Have students take notes. I was reading an article most recently. There's some research out there now that suggests that note taking by hand helps with retention. We're still looking at some of that to make sure that it's that the research is headed in the right direction on that. But we think that probably there's a lot to be said about a student being able to take a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and sit down and to make notes directly from a text. And I'll say this because I've seen it in middle schools in particular. When those computers are up, you have a class of 28 students, and all of their laptop notebooks are open, and they're all looking at that. I've noticed in the back of the room, some are working on the activity, some are playing a game, some are visiting a website, some are doing this, some are doing that. There are a lot of distractions. In a textbook, the distractions, it's easier to focus. There are fewer distractions, so they can flip through the textbook, get the information, and note it. Now, reading strategies, they vary. And remember, not everything works at every time. You've taught a while, you understand that classroom management systems that you use sometimes work in one class, they won't work in another. Sometimes they won't work from one day to the next in the same class. The same thing holds true for reading strategies. You have to vary it. You have to change it up with students. And it's about diversification and using multiple methods to reach the students. I'm going to say this last thing here. I think we're at the end of our slide presentation. I want to say this. Years ago, when we first started working on this when Goodheart-Willcox got into the business of writing ag textbook, I was one of the first author teams to work. And I remember the president of the company was John Flanagan. And John Flanagan said this, he said, "I'm an educator first and I'm a book publisher second." And I've never forgotten that. And I've got to say that working with GW has been a real pleasure because they focus on they want to create a good product that's out there and it has to be economic and commercially viable. But the goal is it useful for teachers to use? Does it help students? So now we're down to the questions, Josh. So Josh is going to answer all the questions, right, Josh?
Yes, totally. No, thank you for that wonderful presentation, Barry. And then, so we have about 13 minutes left. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A or the chat. It looks like we have a few already. So to start us off, for Barry, so for some of these reading strategies you discussed, do you recommend making these activities part of the grade, or how do you structure grades?
Well, for me, I would recommend, it's almost like field testing everything. Before you, I guess you're asking, do you put it in as a grade first or not? Sometimes I would test it out first to see if it's something that would work. You don't want a whole grade book full of bad grades for something that may not have deployed properly. So once you become skilled at it and try it out with students for a while and use it as a formative assessment to check your instruction and to check what they're learning. Try it out that way. And then it could be that later on you decide to add something in as a graded assessment. And you can always grade it, and then you can look at the grades, but again, you can also set just how much of a percentage it's worth in terms of the total class grade.
And then another question we have, how do you recruit new students for an ag program or FFA?
How do you recruit? Oh, wow. Okay. So the way that I've recruited, this is the way I got recruited. And I've tried to remember this. It's about the instructor. Does the instructor like teaching ag? Do they like teaching young people? Is the program interesting? Are you doing fun things? Is the class educational, but yet is it fun? Are there FFA activities? Are students doing well? Are they making progress? The students in schools, I mean, they see what goes on in an ag program from outside, and then they decide, yeah, I want to be a part of that, or no, I don't. And I think the teacher's the key. You're the key. you're absolutely the key to recruitment of students. I think it starts with you and goes from there.
And then it doesn't look like we have anything right now, but we'll give it another minute or so. And while we see if there's any other questions, if you guys are interested in a certificate of participation, feel free to email me at jcarlson@g-w.com. It's on the screen as well. And you could just ask me for that certificate and we could send it your way. And then my colleague Abby also left my email in the chat. And then also, Abby also mentioned in the chat, if anybody would like a sample, we do print and digital of either of these textbooks. Feel free to leave it in the chat and we will be happy to send it to you. And then additionally, in the next few days, you'll receive an email with this recording of Barry's presentation and then also these PowerPoint slides so you guys can have them on hand. But it doesn't look like we have anything else. So I'd like to thank Barry and thank all of you for joining us today. So thank you, Barry.
Yes, thank you. I'm very glad to be a part of this. And Josh, you and Abby can share my contact information if teachers have any questions about this particular textbook. We got into this because we were concerned about making sure that our teachers had the materials that they needed to be successful. And so many times I see teachers struggle and when they're first getting started in particular, because they don't feel like they have enough resources. Well, these are resource-rich products, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. And I think that we're headed in the right direction with it. And I encourage you to get a sample copy, take a look at it, and see if it fits your particular program. And then reach out to me. I'm happy to give you, some advice or some more information beyond this presentation, for sure.
One more question we have, could these resources be applied at a community college setting?
Yeah, see, that's from Emily. Yes, I would say the Foundations book might be very useful. There are a number of other books out. They're on my shelf. I'm not going to get up and run over, but there are several that are over there. Natural resources. There's one on floriculture and horticulture. I know the people who wrote that, and they are just phenomenal teachers. And yes, I would say that they are they're very good. The exploring book is designed, again, it's designed for the middle grades area because that's a target group for us. We're trying to get them excited about ag. And so that book is designed for that. But the Foundations book has a lot of information in it as well. And it's easy to read, I think, and quite useful. Yes.
So it looks like we got nothing else. Once again, if you guys want a sample, print or digital, please leave it in the chat, or you can always email me, jcarlson@g-w.com. And we left Barry's email in the chat as well. Thank you, Barry, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Have a good night.